Welcome to the Sacred River event. This is technically a launch party or event for the Sacred River, one of the Coleridge reader on the imagination. I'm going to let Joe tell you all about the actual book and of course Coleridge, and then Jason Farley will sit down and they will have a robust discussion. And one of the benefits and why we want to keep doing events here is that that discussion is, of course, between them, but also with you all. With there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions and be part of the discussion as well. So we encourage that. There you can purchase this, as it is a book launch party afterwards, with a 20% discount as part of the launch. And William can help you with that later afterwards. And there will be wine and cheese, which we'll pull out. So if it's the first time you're coming to a Roman Roads After Hours, after the event, we'll fold all the chairs, bring out the wine and cheese, and mingle and continue the discussion there until we're out of wine and cheese, I guess. I've got a lot, though. Well, let's see. What I've forgotten. Well, in case you don't know, Joe Carlson, he is a translator of Dante's Divine Comedy. He's a professor at New St. Andrews College, has published multiple books, including the introduction and editing of this edition of the Sacred River Coleridge Reader. So without further ado, Joe Carlson.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. This is just delightful. This is just fun. Let me open in prayer. Father, thank you for your kindness. Thank you for the love that you've shown us. Thank you that you've given us a world that is knowable, that you've given us minds that can interact with the world and know the world, and that through the world, through the things that you have made, we see your glory manifested to us, that we can know you more, and that we can love you more, and that we can come into a deeper union with your love and your person through the things that you have made and through the things that you've revealed to us. Thank you for men like Coleridge and other authors that we get to read and study, that get to shape our intellect, shape our mind, shape our affections. I pray that you do that tonight, that you'd be glorified in what we say and do. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. So tonight's this is our third after hours. So for those of you who have been to all three, well done. We did Dante first. We did Milton. In December, we read on the morning of Christ's Nativity and had a great discussion afterwards it was Joffrey, Swait, and I. And one of the things that came up in the discussion in the group, Sean Cernick actually brought up, and she was going to be here. Maybe she's coming still. But how do we grow in our ability to apprehend the world poetically? And by that, we already have to qualify. We don't mean in a way that's not real, as if a poetic understanding is a non-real way and a literal understanding is the real way, right? As if metaphor is just that, is just something that we make up in our minds, but the real world is this, right? That's been the modernist mindset, that what the real world is defined by science and by equations and by the left hemisphere of your brain. Whereas the right, it's pretty, it lends beauty and color and it helps us understand things maybe, but it's not really real, right? And one of the things that we were discussing after that event, or as part of the event in the discussion, is how do we recapture a sense of a God as poet, as the world as poetry, and poetry as a means of actually apprehending and understanding the world as it is, right? That the scientific, modernistic, naturalistic, reductionist view of the world is a lie, or at least a half-truth, that it doesn't actually get us to where we can understand really what the world is. And so poetry, the apprehending beauty, seeing the world as image and symbol, seeing the world as language, the things in the world as language, is really what I want to get to tonight. And I think Coleridge can help us. He has some amazing poetry. Perhaps you've read before The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, or Kubla Khan, or some of his other smaller poems. We're going to read two of them later, This Lime Tree Bower, My Prison, and then Frost at Midnight. There's a couple things I want to identify and draw attention to there. as we read those. And then, as mentioned, Jason is going to come up and we're just going to riff and go for it. And it'll be inclusive. You guys ask questions, interject, interrupt. It'll just be one big discussion. So it says Coleridge's poetic epistemology. Just a big word, fancy word, meaning how do we know what we know? Like, how is it that we know that this is a lectern, that this is a book, that this is a TV screen, that there's a tree outside? Like, how do we know these things? How do I know that gravity is real? Right? How do we see the world? How do we read the world? Right? And what I want to suggest is that Coleridge's definition of the imagination, which is very different from, or at least expands greatly upon what we typically think of the imagination as, is really helpful in coming to a better, deeper, more authentic, more faithful, more obedient understanding of the world. And specifically by that I mean understanding of what God has made, what God is revealing to us, and how God is speaking to us, and how we ought to be listening to him, how we ought to know him. So that's kind of where I want to go tonight. A poetic epistemology, simply meaning how we know what we know, depends a great deal upon our imaginative grappling, our imaginative comprehension and apprehension of the world. Like, what is the lens through which we see the world? Is it the naturalistic, reductionistic, all a star is a flaming ball of gas? Or is it, even in your world, that's only what it is made of, not what it is, right? To borrow from Voyage of the Dawn Treader. So how do we know what we know? Do we do it by means of this reductionistic, scientific, naturalistic, devoid of any symbolic spiritual meaning? That's the modernist approach. Or is there something about poetry that can help us understand what it is that we see and how we see it? So that's kind of where I'm wanting to go tonight. To start with, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words whose voice is not heard. Their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them he has set a tent for the sun, which comes out like a bridegroom leaving his chamber, and like a strong man runs its course with joy. Its rising is from the end of the heavens, and its circuit to the end of them, and there is nothing hidden from its heat. Now we in the 21st century, we know that the sun is at the center of the universe, our solar system, and that we orbit around it, right? We live in a heliocentric universe. God knew that too, right? God knew that when he created the world. On day 4, when he set the sun in the heavens, he knew what kind of system he created and what he set into motion. And yet what he reveals to us through the psalmist is not some kind of imagery where the sun is still and the earth is going around it. Rather, he's speaking to us from our perspective that we see the sun go across the sky, running its course with joy. Now, is God just being silly? Is he just being metaphorical? Is he just condescending? Is he thinking, okay, you rubes back in 1200 BC, you don't really know yet that the sun is at the center of the universe, so I'll just play along? Or is he purposefully giving us a way to see the world? Is he purposefully teaching us, catechizing us in a certain way of seeing the world, a certain way of reading the world that is perhaps a little bit deeper than, oh, the sun is at the center and the earth goes around it? Or is he training us, is God training us by his word to see the world as poetry, as beauty, as meaning that is deeper than the atoms and the sum of parts, right? There is something more meaningful about the sun running its course with joy. Nothing hidden from its heat. There's something more meaningful about the stars singing to us. Literally singing to us. I mean, they did this in Psalm 19. They did it in Luke 2, when the stars came down and sang to the shepherds. And then one stuck around for a couple years, or at least a year and a half, and guided the wise men to the stable or to the house where Jesus was, right? So how do we think about the world? Do we think about it materialistically, naturalistically, reductionistically? Can I say that? Or do we think about it the way that God wants us to think about it? Are we obedient in our apprehension of the things that he has made? To see it the way that he wants us to see it the way that he has revealed it to us. What is that world doing? And this gets at what the meaning of the world is, and why it's not just, okay, it's not just fancy language. No, the meaning of the world is the glory of God. Right? This is what he has revealed to us, himself. The heavens are declaring the glory of God. They're shouting at us. They're singing to us. The world is full of harmony that all declares and points to not only the things God has made, but the character and nature of him who made all things. We'll get to Colossians 1 later on. But what I want us to see is that when we look out at the world, depending on what kind of glasses we are wearing, we will either see just dead matter in motion and then go to church on Sunday and do our spiritual stuff there and then come back out on Monday and see dead matter in motion, or we will see a world charged with the grandeur of God, as Hopkins said in his poem. Right? Do we see a world charged with beauty, charged with personality, you might even say, right? Charged with intention and will that responds to God. When Jesus calmed the waters in the sea, something responded to the voice of Jesus. Do we see the world that way? Do we see the world as something that responds obediently to the words of Christ, to the words of its maker and sustainer? Or do we just see it as, okay, there's all of this dead matter over here, and then we have this spiritual thing over here, and then we have this dead matter over... No, right? The world is charged with the grandeur of God. Okay. Dante, because, of course. The glory of him, this is from the Canto 1 and Canto 10 of Paradiso. The glory of him who moves everything, penetrates the universe, and shines forth in one part more, while in another less. Gazing on, and then from Canto 10, gazing on his Son with the love the one and the other, so this beautiful Trinitarian formulation, gazing on his Son with the love the one and the other eternally breathe forth the primal and ineffable power with such order made all things wheel round through mind and space, both immaterial and material, both spiritual and physical. He who stands in wonder cannot do so without a taste of him. You go outside, and we start to do this on cold, clear nights, and we stand beneath the heavens and we go, wow, praise God. But do we do that on a cloudy day when the trees are waving in the wind? Do we do that as we're walking down Main Street and it's fall and dead leaves are all over the place? Do we do that as we're walking up our driveway? Do we do that as we lay down at night surrounded by sheetrock and overhead lights? Right? Everything God has made, including the materials that man has taken and made something out of, everything God has made speaks of his glory, points to his glory, illuminates his glory, such that we cannot look anywhere without wonder and get a taste of him. Which gets at, what is this world for? What are we doing in this material world beneath the heavens, surrounded by creation? We are to hear his voice, see his language, taste his communication to us. How do we know what we know? What is it that we are knowing? What is it that's being communicated? What is it that's being said? Right? Just in case you think I'm only a medieval, see if you can name this quote. It's the second half of the quote is on the next slide. Since the perfection of blessedness consists in the knowledge of God, stop right there. Like, how often do we think of that? The perfection of blessedness consists in the knowledge of God. Knowing God is what makes us most happy. He has been pleased, in order that none might be excluded from the means of obtaining felicity, not only to deposit in our minds that seed of religion of which we have already spoken, but so to manifest his perfections in the whole structure of the universe, and daily place himself in our view, that we cannot open our eyes without being compelled to behold him. It's like he's reading Dante. So he's saying the exact same thing. His essence, indeed, is incomprehensible, utterly transcending all human thought. But on each of his works, his glory is engraven in characters so bright, so distinct, and so illustrious that none, however dull and illiterate, can plead ignorance as their excuse. Hence, with perfect truth, the psalmist exclaims, "He covered himself with light as with a garment," as if he had said that God for the first time was arrayed in visible attire when, in the creation of the world, he displayed those glorious banners on which, to whatever side we turn, we behold his perfections visibly portrayed. In the same place, the psalmist aptly compares the expanded heavens to his royal tent, and says, "He layeth the beams of his chambers in the waters, maketh the clouds his chariot, and walketh upon the wings of the wind, sending forth the winds and lightnings as his swift messengers." Before I advance to the next slide, who is this? Can anybody guess?
John Calvin?
Yes.
Felicity gave away.
Yeah. Institutes Book 1, Chapter 5. "And because the glory of his power and wisdom is more refulgent in the firmament, in the heavens, it is frequently designated as his palace. And first, wherever you turn your eyes, there is no portion of the world, however minute, that does not exhibit at least some sparks of beauty. The glory of him who made all things penetrates the universe, some places more and some places less." It's the exact same thing. Dante or Calvin is just riffing off of Dante. You can quote me. "While it is impossible to contemplate the vast and beautiful fabric as it extends around without being overwhelmed by the immense weight of glory. Hence, the author of the Epistle to the Hebrews elegantly describes the visible worlds as images of the invisible." Images of the invisible. This gets at the heart of what I'm trying to get at here. When we see the visible, what are we seeing? Right? And this goes back to how we know what we know. When we look at the visible things of the world, what are we really seeing? Are we just seeing the physical? Is that all we're seeing? Do we have eyes to see more than that? Do we have minds and imaginations that help us see more than just the visible? Right? Because the visible things show forth the invisible. "The elegant structure of the world serving us as a kind of mirror in which we may behold God, though otherwise invisible. God, being invisible, manifests himself to us in the things that he has made. Do we see him when we look out at the world? Do we see not just character and power, but do we see him magnifying himself to us in our eyes, in our minds, in our hearts, in our affections as we look out at the world? For the same reason, the psalmist attributes language to celestial objects, a language which all nations understand, the manifestation of the Godhead being too clear to escape the notice of any people, however obtuse. The Apostle Paul, stating this still more clearly, says, "That which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has showed it unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead." How do we grow in our ability to read the world rightly? If this is how we're supposed to read the world, if this is how we're supposed to see the visible things, if this is what we're supposed to recognize and understand when we look out on the natural world, the spiritual meaning behind it, the spiritual manifestation of God behind it, not in some weird pantheistic, it's not like the tree is God, but God declares himself to us through the tree, right? Through the brick, through the sky, through the ground, through everything that God has made, declaring himself to us. What lens do we need to be able to see that, and what can help us, what can help equip us to have that kind of sight? What can help equip us to have that kind of apprehension, that kind of, the sense in which we apprehend something, not, yeah, anyway. What Coleridge, we are going to get to some Coleridge, promise you. What Coleridge suggests is that the minds, or the the epistemology that does not see the manifestation of God in the world is truncated, limited, stillborn even. And that this poetic epistemology, this poetic way of seeing the world, that sees not just the thing, but the thing symbolized, the thing pointed to, the thing represented, the thing that, the visible thing that reveals and instructs us about the invisible thing, that way of seeing the world is actually equipping us to see as we were created to see. And poetry, specifically poetry, helps us grow in that capability, grow in that ability to read the world right. Why? Because that is poetry. You go outside, that's poetry. Why? Because God is a singer. God is a speaker. God is a poet. God is a storyteller. And God has given us imaginations, not just, and we'll get to this in a little bit, not just to remember past things that are not present. That's one small part of the imagination. But to actually perceive the world for what it is, to look through the material and see the glory of God that's there revealed. Okay, little Lewis, because again, why not? It will have escaped no one. This is from a really interesting essay called Blue Spells and Flalanspheres, which I won't explain because that would take too long. That's another after hours. But this comes at the end of it when he's discussing what the imagination is. So we're getting closer to Coleridge, because I think Lewis is riffing off of Coleridge a little bit, and everyone's riffing off of Dante, which is all coming from Psalm 19. So, it will have escaped no one that in such a scale of writers, the poets will take the highest place, and among the poets, those who have at once the tenderest care for old words and the surest instinct for the creation of new metaphors. But it must not be supposed that I am in any sense putting forward the imagination as the organ of truth. This is a really interesting distinction. The imagination is not the organ of truth. We are not talking of truth, but of meaning. Meaning which is the antecedent condition both of truth and falsehood, whose antithesis is not error, but nonsense. It's not meaning and error, it's meaning or nonsense. Truth and error is on a different plane. I am a rationalist. For me, reason is the natural organ of truth. But imagination is the organ of meaning. Imagination, producing new metaphors or revivifying old, is not the cause of truth, but its condition. What does that mean? Your imagination does not say, this is true, that is false. Your imagination says, whatever this is what it means. Offers that meaning up to the reason, and the reason says, okay, that's true, that's false. But before you can decide what is true, what is false, you have to know what things mean, right? And what is the faculty in the human soul, person, what is the faculty that decides and defines the meaning of things? What's the imagination? Why? Well, because we live in a world of images. We perceive the world by images, sounds, beauty. All of that comes in. It's our imagination that receives that, perceives that, and organizes that into a kind of landscape in which meaning is defined, and then our reason comes. It offers that up to our reason, and our reason says, okay, that's true, that's false, that's good, that's bad, right? But reason has to have something to work with in order to define truth and falsehood. And it's the imagination that gathers up the perceptions that we have and attributes meaning to those things. What does a tree mean? That's the work of the imagination. And how do we equip the imagination to know what things truly mean? Story, poetry, right? That's the kind of language that is able to see beyond the visible. The kind of language that is able to say, this is that, right? To compare things and draw associations between two unlike things, either in a simile, using like or as, or in a metaphor, where it's just equation. God is a rock. Now, we all know that God is not a rock, but God uses that kind of language to inform our imagination so that when we think about God, we are thinking of rock-like qualities. Our imagination takes that phrase in And in that landscape of our understanding, in the landscape of our imagination, meaning is gathered about who God is. He is a rock, he's a mountain, he is light, right? These are all images that go into the imagination, shape our understanding of what it means, what does the word God mean, and helps us understand what it is that we are thinking about when we pray to God or think about God. So meaning is antecedent to truth. The imagination is antecedent to reason. The imagination is the organ of meaning, whereas reason is the organ of truth. Okay, so now getting to Coleridge. Before I read this, I hinted at this a little bit ago. The classic, traditional, every dictionary you find, the definition of the imagination is that faculty which is able to conjure up images of things not present, right? Whether that's fantasy, whether that is I close my eyes and I can imagine you all, right? I see you in my mind's eye. That even that phrase, the mind's eye, that's what gets attributed or associated with the imagination. And that's okay, that's part of it. Coleridge wanted to push that, and Coleridge is actually keying off of John Davies, another author, which is also available on the back, from a poem that he has called Noche Tipsum, and I'll read a selection from that in a little bit. But again, carrying over this more medieval understanding of the world that is that Hopkins saw and related in that poem. The world is charged with the grandeur of God, right? To see the world symbolically and to not think that it means something less just because you're using symbols, or that it's not real because you're using symbols, or that it's less literal because you're using symbols. No, the medievals would look at the world and see the world symbolically, make associations between things, and say that that is the real meaning. That's the better way of seeing it than just the sum of its parts. Again, Ramondu, that's only what it is made of, not what it is, right? So Coleridge, keying off of John Davies, keying off of the medievals, keying off of Scripture, says this: the imagination then I consider either as primary or secondary. We're not gonna talk about the secondary imagination tonight. That would just take us too long. So just the primary. The primary imagination I hold to be the living power and prime agent of all human perception, and as a repetition in the finite mind of the eternal act of creation in the infinite I am. That's a mouthful, right? That's a lot. There's a lot here. So let me unpack it just a little bit. So first of all, he means this is happening inescapably. Every time we open our eyes, open our ears, open our nose, open our mouth, open our hands, and sense something, we are activating our imagination. Our imagination is right there, is the manager of the senses, is the manager of that by which we perceive the world. And it's actually through the tools, through the agents, or through the instrumentality of the senses, that the imagination in our minds and in our souls, that the imagination is actually perceiving the world. Right? So it's not our eyes perceiving the world, it's our imagination using our eyes to perceive the world. These are just tools, right? Through which the imagination reaches out and apprehends what it sees, hears, feels, tastes, touches, smells. So it's inescapable. We're all, right now, each one of us is activating our imagination in order to apprehend, to perceive what it is that we're perceiving, right? It's a living power. That's what he means by that. It's a living power. It's alive. It's happening. If you are alive, if your heart is beating and your senses are alive, which they are, then your imagination is keyed up, right? It's active. It's a living power. It's also the prime agent of perception, which again, the idea of agency, it's the imagination reaching out into the world, reaching out through the senses into the things that God has made, and grasping after things and bringing it back. This is why the imagination is the organ of meaning. It's that which goes out, sees things, brings it back, and organizes all of those thoughts into something rational that you can think about and and discuss and apprehend and know. So it's the living power, it's alive, it's inescapable, it's happening. It's the prime agent, it's reaching out through the senses of all human perception. And anything we perceive is perceived by the imagination and then offered up to the reason. But then we get this fascinating second sentence, which if it sounds like on the cusp of blasphemy, almost, right? A repetition in the finite mind of the eternal act of creation in the infinite I am. What does that mean? And how is that connected to the primary action of the intellect, or of the imagination? So, living power, it's always happening. Prime agent, it's moving out into the world, apprehending things. But it's also a repetition, something about God's eternal act of creation. God speaking the world into existence, not just once, but sustaining it by the power of his word, right? We don't believe in a watchmaker God who set the world going and then stepped away. Like, where did I put the world? Oh, that's right, it's over here. No, he sustains it by the power of his word, continually speaking it, right? Continually sustaining it, upholding it, always in Christ. The Logos, right? That's happening out there. What does it mean to be a repetition? What does it mean for the imagination? What we perceive by the imagination, what does it mean to be a repetition of that in here? Well, think about this. What do I have next? I'll come back to these in just a minute. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him, in Christ, in the Logos, in the Word, was life, and the life was the light of men. Now, often we take that as the light of regeneration. But it's actually not talking about regeneration here. What he's talking about is the light of all men, a light that we cannot overcome, that the darkness cannot overcome, a light that all of us partake in. He's talking about the light of consciousness. How do we see, by your light do we see light? How do we know what we know? How do we see what we see? We are made in the image of God. God has made us perceiving beings and sustains us as perceiving beings. And it's his light in us that allows us to see anything, right? Again, if you're just a naturalistic, materialistic, reductionistic modern, God is happening over there and I'm happening over here, and if I feel like it, I'll go worship him, but if not, then I have nothing really to do with him and he has really nothing to do with me. But that's not true. That's not our relationship to God. And our relationship to God is not just one of redeemed and redeemer, as if that was the case and God brought me into relationship with him. No, I am sustained physically, mentally, spiritually alive because God speaks my name. I am in every facet, in every faculty of my being, thoroughly, utterly, completely, absolutely dependent on him. My knowledge, my seeing, my perception, my thoughts, all of it, the faculties that are active in my body and soul are so because of Christ. And so the light of men here is the light of knowledge, the light of common grace knowledge, the light of just perception. We see because the Logos is at work in our mind. Now here's going back to Coleridge. Eternal act as a repetition in the finite mind of the eternal act of creation in the infinite I am. God creates the world through the Logos, right? Through the Logos, through the Logos, through the Word, through Christ, all things were made, and all things are upheld. And if he is the light of men, the light by which we see light, the light by which we know anything, you have the work of the Logos out there, and you have the work of the Logos in here. Like, have you thought about that? How is it that you're able to know something? Like, you didn't do that on your own. You didn't figure that one out on your own. That was a gift given to you and sustained in you by the one who made you. So the Logos works out there. The Logos works out here. What does the imagination do? The imagination perceives what the Logos did out there, and that meaning is intelligible because of what the Logos is doing in here. Right? We're connecting the dots. Like Logos out here, Logos in here, the imagination reaches out, brings it back, and there's a click. That's a tree. That's brick. Action of Logos in both places, the repetition in the finite mind of the eternal act of creation of the great I Am. That's what the imagination is doing. Now, okay, why does that matter? Well, come back to what we've been talking about. How do we know what we know? How is it that we know that that's a brick, that that's wood, that that's paper, that that's fluorescent light bulbs? How do we know what we know? Well, first, because the world is intelligible. Why? Because God made it intelligible. Why? Because he is communicating to us through what he has made. And in order for us to know him, he has made things intelligible so that we can know him. Right? He wouldn't manifest himself to us in a world that could not be known. Just wouldn't do that. So he has made the world, made it knowable, made us the kinds of creatures who can know things, and he does that by putting his own Logos in our mind, the image of God. So it means to be made the image of God, partly, because we have his truth in us, his light in us, which is why sin is such a tragedy, because it blinds us to that light and makes us not be able to see the glory of God in the things that he has made. Right? We are bent now, to borrow out of the Silent Planet language. We are bent, and we have dulled our vision. We have dulled our consciences. We have dulled our sight, our perception. We have dirtied our imagination, clogged our imagination so that it's not, the pipeline from Logos to Logos is not running smoothly. Right? But in the work of the Spirit, in the regeneration of the soul, and in the renewing of our mind, that the drain of our imagination is unclogged, and things are able to flow freely, more freely. Okay. So this is something he's taken from John Davies. This is 200 years or 150 years before Coleridge. This is just an excerpt from one of his poems, and he's talking. The whole poem is on the nature of the soul, from Nosce Tipsa, meaning know thyself. So how do we know ourselves? Well, he goes through all these different faculties, and he comes to this one. These three stanzas are explaining what the imagination is, or common sense, which is an interesting identification. Your imagination is just your common sense. And yet these porters, talking about the senses, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, hands, and yet these porters, which all things admit, themselves perceive not, nor discern the things. Like, it's not our eyes that are perceiving, it's not our eyes that are discerning. One common power doth in the forehead sit, which all their proper forms together brings. The imagination brings together all the things that we're perceiving and collects them in this, again, this landscape, if you will. For all those nerves which spirits of sense do bear, and to those outward organs spreading go, united are as in a center there. And there this power those sundry forms doth know. Those outward organs present things receive. This inward sense doth absent things retain. There's the classic definition of the imagination, right? Retaining things that are absent. Yet straight transmits all the forms, both present and absent. All forms she doth perceive unto a higher region of the brain. Right? So things present, things absent, the imagination gathers. That's where meaning is understood, meaning is found, meaning is gathered together and presented to the higher regions of the brain, the intellect, the reason, which decides whether something is true or not. Something he wrote in 1805. So the definition of the imagination was from his Biographia Literaria, which was written in 1816 or published in 1816. This is from something he wrote in 1805 in a notebook. And it kind of gets at the same thing as what we're talking about. In looking at the objects of nature, while I am thinking, as at yonder moon dim glimmering through the dewy window pane, which is just a fabulous phrase. I originally wanted to name this volume Yonder Moon Dim Glimmering, but Daniel said that nobody would have any clue what that... As that yonder moon dim glimmering through the dewy window pane, I seem rather to be seeking. Here's this idea of active agency moving out through the eyes, seeking, as it were asking for a symbolic language of something within me that already and forever exists. I'm looking out at the moon, and I'm seeking. It's like, there's something there that reminds me of something I've always known. Work of the Logos out there, work of the Logos in here. Symbolic language. What is symbolic language? The moon is symbolic language. And that doesn't make it any less material, any less real. It makes it more real. Why? Because it's not just matter. It's matter displaying, demonstrating, speaking, singing the glory of God. Symbolic language for something within me. There's a faculty in me that understands that language implicitly. If only sin didn't get in the way. That already and forever exists, then it seems like I'm doing that more than just observing anything new. Even when the latter is the case, yet still I have always an obscure feeling as if that new phenomenon were the dim awaking of a forgotten or hidden truth of my inner nature. It is still interesting as a word, a symbol. It is Logos, the creator. What is? The activity of the Logos is what I'm seeing out there, and the activity of the Logos is what I sense in here that is connecting the two. How do I know what I know? What is it that I see? How do I know what that is? The Logos, Christ in me, Christ in the world, speaking, communication, symbolic language. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. Whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, and that in everything he might be preeminent. We get so used to this kind of language that we just attribute it to Sunday school things. Without thinking every minute of the day, what I am seeing is the preeminence of Christ. What I am knowing is the preeminence of Christ. What I am sensing, what I am perceiving, what I am doing is all in relation to my growing ability in the Spirit to perceive and understand the preeminence of Christ. This word beginning here is in the Greek is arche. And it does mean beginning, but it also means the integration point. That which gives meaning to everything else. That which everything finds its point of contact with everything else. Right? Christ is the arche. Christ is the beginning. All things were created through him and for him. He is holding all things together. In him all things hold together. When I look out at the world, what do I see? I see things held together in Christ. Right? Do I see that? Is that the language I'm hearing? Or do I just have this naturalistic mindset that sees, oh, that's just dead matter, and then I go to church, do my spiritual stuff there, and then come back out to dead matter? No, we need our imaginations to be equipped, cultivated, nurtured, beefed up, so that when we see, we're seeing obediently. When we're hearing obediently. When we're tasting, smelling, touching, we're sensing the world obediently, hearing, receiving, perceiving the communication that the world is giving us. Okay. We'll get back to here. I'll just read one poem instead of two. And then we'll set the chairs up and chat. This is Frost at Midnight. The setup is he is in the northern country by the Lake District. He has its infant son in a cradle next to him, and it's midnight, and it's cold. Frost is outside, and he's looking out the window at the world, and he's thinking, man, I am so glad we're here that you, my son, get to grow up here instead of where I grew up in the city, because here you get to see nature all the more clearly. And there's something important about that he gets to. Frost at midnight. The frost performs its secret ministry, unhelped by any wind. The owlet's cry came loud, and hark, again, loud as before. The inmates of my cottage, all at rest, have left me to that solitude which suits abstruser musings, save that at my side my cradled infant slumbers peacefully. 'Tis calm indeed, so calm that it disturbs and vexes meditation with its strange and extreme stillness. Sea, hill, and wood, this populous village, sea and hill and wood, with all the numberless goings-on of life, inaudible as dreams. The thin blue flame lies on my low-burnt fire and quivers not. Only that film which fluttered on the grate still flutters there, the sole unquiet thing. Methinks its motion in this hush of nature gives it dim sympathies with me who live, making it a companionable form with which I can hold commune. Idle thought. But still the living spirit in our frame that loves not to behold a lifeless thing transfuses into all its own delights, its own volition, sometimes with deep faith and sometimes with fantastic playfulness. Ah, me, amused by no such curious toys of the self-watching, subtilizing mind, how often in my early schoolboy days with most believing superstitious wish, presageful, have I gazed upon the bars to watch the stranger there, and as oft, belike with unclosed lids, already had I dreamt of my sweet birthplace and the old church tower whose bells, the poor man's only music, rang from morn to evening, all the hot fair day, so sweetly that they stirred and haunted me with a wild pleasure, falling on mine ear most like articulate sounds of things to come. So gazed I, till the soothing things I dreamt lulled me to sleep, and sleep prolonged my dreams, and so I brooded all the following morn, awed by the stern preceptor's face, mine eye fixed with mock study on my swimming book, save if the door half opened and I snatched a hasty glance, and still my heart leaped up, for still I hoped to see the stranger's face, townsman or aunt or sister more beloved, my playmate when we both were clothed alike. It's the first half of the poem. He's looking at the fire, and meditating on the fire brings him back through his imagination to earlier fires that he looked at, specifically when he was a schoolboy. And all of the meaning of that earlier occurrence is brought into this fire grate that he's seeing now. And the associations are redoubled because of that moment of connection and association through his imagination. Then he turns to his child. Dear babe, that sleepest cradled at my side, whose gentle breathings heard in this deep calm fill up the interspersed vacancies and momentary pauses of the thought. My babe, so beautiful, it thrills my heart with tender gladness, thus to look at thee, and think that thou shalt learn far other lore, and in far other scenes, for I was reared in the great city, pent mid cloisters dim, and saw not lovely but the sky and stars. But thou, my babe, shalt wander like a breeze by lakes and sandy shores, beneath the crags of ancient mountain, and beneath the clouds which image in their bulk both lakes and shores and mountain crags. So shalt thou see and hear the lovely shapes and sounds intelligible of that eternal language which thy God utters, who from eternity doth teach himself in all, and all things in himself. Great universal teacher, he shall mold thy spirit, and by giving make it ask. Therefore all seasons shall be sweet to thee, whether the summer clothe the general earth with greenness, or the red breast sit and sing betwixt the tufts of snow on the bare branch of mossy apple tree, while the nigh thatch smokes in the sun thaw, whether the eve drops fall, heard only in the trances of the blast, or if the secret ministry of frost shall hang them up in silent icicles, quietly shining to the moon. All right, Jason, come on up. Let's switch things up a bit. Look how official we are. So, first, thoughts.
It's really interesting when you study just kind of the whole history of philosophy, and see that all through, the ancient world, the Middle Ages, there's so much concern with metaphysics. What is this thing?
Yeah.
Right? And then you hit the Enlightenment, and immediately the concern becomes epistemology, right? Because because all of a sudden they say, well, wait, if knowledge can only be called real knowledge if I know the essence of a thing and I don't have access to the essence of a thing, can we call anything knowledge, right? And so you get this whole just concern with epistemology, and that most people think still hasn't been solved, but yet right there, Coleridge he solved it for us.
There it is.
Right? And so I love just especially the idea that our imagination is actually an organ of meaning,
Yeah.
right? That because it isn't the question is always, shortly before Coleridge comes along, you have Kant come along and say, all we really have is perception, right? All we have is colors coming in,
Perception
sounds
of the material
perception of the material world. Yeah, colors coming in, sounds coming in, and then, but why is it that we say that there's meaning? Well, our imagination organizes and then projects meaning onto.
There's a bunch of little Lego blocks out there. Our imagination takes it in, builds something, and says, "This is what it is."
Right. Yeah. But the meaning isn't in the thing.
Right.
The meaning is all provided by our imagination, and that's actually how most people now think about meaning. Right. So there's Freud has this. He has really it's a whole book on where does God come from. Right? And he's Freud, and so he says daddy issues, right? Everybody's got daddy issues. We wish we had a better dad, and so we project one up into the sky.
Right.
Well, unfortunately, as most of the time, that's actually how we approach everything, right? So we say, well, why do we call God Father? Well, because we need Father. Fathers protect us and they provide for us, and God does that too. And so we've started to call God a father. What Coleridge points out, and I think Paul in Ephesians points out, is actually the reason there are fathers at all.
Right.
The reason we have fathers is because God is a father,
Right.
and then he created the world, and he said, hey, I like being a father. You're going to like this too, so I'm going to create you as fathers and as parents. Right? And so we didn't project the meaning father onto God. God projected the meaning of himself onto the fact that there's fathers.
Right.
And so when Coleridge says our imagination perceives fatherhood, right, that finds the meaning of fatherhood, the meaning is really there. Right. So when we call God Father, the meaning is really there in Father,
Right.
in the Father that we're looking at.
In defining knowledge as communication, there's something meaningful being said to us that didn't originate in us, right?
Right.
What we're hearing, what we're seeing, what we're tasting, touching, feeling is something that is in itself meaningful, whether we were born or not, because its meaning is in the Logos, in God.
Yeah.
And what we're able to do through our imaginations is apprehend that. And the reason why that connection is there is because we are also meaningful, because we are also one of the creations of God.
Right, yeah. There's a great scene in
By the way, this is Jason Farley, in case you don't know him. Longtime friend, pastor, teacher, writer, educator, all things brilliant. That's just, there's my introduction.
So since you call me all things brilliant, I'm going to reference a bad action movie from the 90s. So a movie called The 13th Warrior. I'm recommending the movie. I enjoyed it thoroughly, but it's about a warrior from Spain who's dropped in amongst a bunch of German warriors, if I remember, German or a northern tribal warriors, and he doesn't speak the language. And he's sitting there around the fire, and they move through time and show the process of him beginning to understand. And so a word here, a word there, and so he's learning the language, and it moves from what sounds like babble that they are understanding. So it's obviously language, but he just doesn't understand it. And it shows the process of him beginning to learn and understand. And as you were talking about Coleridge, I was thinking, well, that's what it's like to have your imagination come to understand what's already being spoken, right? The meaning is there.
Right.
Us not hearing it is because our imagination doesn't speak the language of creation because of the fall. Right. But as our language is tuned, it's like, well, it's the combination of the process of God grabbing our hands that we've been holding in our ears, and He's like, stop. So, and then the process of learning the language that is being spoken to us all of the
Sanctification is fluency.
Yeah.
In what God has said.
Right. Yeah. It's a restoration to a language that we know.
Yeah. Right.
but that we forgot.
We purposefully, intentionally forgot. That we plugged our ears to.
Yeah.
And God, that image, freeing our ears to hear what He's saying and to remember what we knew.
Right.
Right.
And what happens in the Enlightenment is that we start trying to convince ourselves that you're not really hearing that. Right.
Right.
I know it seems like you're hearing that, but really you're the one that's saying it.
Yeah.
Right.
You're putting that on.
All
all of the spiritual noumenal things that you're sensing is just originating in you, and you're projecting on.
Right. They stop talking about metaphysics, which is the discussion of what a thing is, because because they've accepted nihilism, metaphysical nihilism, that things don't have a meaning. Right? That things are only just in the shape they are when we come across them, because force has taken things and pushed it into that shape. Right? Well, as soon as you accept that's true, then there isn't really any meaning, right? When I look at the moon, why is the moon that way? Well, because gravity and force and chance chance didn't work on it, but chance as not the goddess chance that actually has a force, but
this impersonal...
the impersonal forces worked on matter in such a way that now the matter happens to be in that shape. Right? But the moon isn't, there's no real meaning or nature or essence to the moon. And so when you look up at the moon and everybody says she about the moon, we'll say, well, it's not really a she, it's just an it, right? And it's really even not an it, it's just matter that happens to be in that shape at that time. So all of the coincidences about the moon, that all of the things that made people start to say, well, the moon is a feminine
something
being, feminine.
It's feminine.
Astrological body.
Yeah.
All of that is us projecting onto it, and is not. The moon isn't really the queen of the sky or anything like that. That's just us projecting onto it. But Coleridge finally, I think, restores the ability to say, oh, actually, no, it's talking to us.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing it. and
Through yon glimmering moon, through the dewy window pane.
right, yeah, exactly. And for someone like myself who is born in this modern time where you experience the world as someone that doesn't really fit anywhere because you don't have an essence, the world doesn't have an essence, you just happen to be here, and so there's no place for you. That dislodged feeling of existence, Coleridge says, hey, it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
Follow me.
In fact, it
right?
isn't that
It
way.
isn't that way, yeah. That your experience is, you're not experiencing reality,
Yeah.
right? You're not tuned to who you are in reality. And so I love, I wish Coleridge would have won the Poet Wars rather than Blake so
Right.
that we'd be in a better place.
We'd be in a healthier place.
Yeah.
So 2 questions, then I want to invite everyone into this. This is sounding an awful lot like nominalism, right? Our modern perception of things, us naming things. Right?
Yeah.
Like the meaning isn't there inherent to the thing itself. The meaning is there because we have placed it there. We have named it such. Like we understand butterflies because we gave it the name butterfly and pinned it to a board with all of its Latin qualities. Right? That's the meaning that we gave. There's nothing inherently meaningful about it because there's no God who created it and gave it meaning. Right? So that's a rough and ready definition of nominalism. Why is that attractive to the modern mind? And then second, how is poetry, the creation, the reading, the memorization, the enjoyment of poetry, the corrective that we need?
I think I don't know if nominalism is attractive to the mind of modern man. I think it is our gut reaction because of the way of all of the assumptions that we're born into in the modern world. That if I asked everybody, I won't because it's awkward. But if I asked you all to close your eyes and picture Earth.
And then raise your hands. Yes, I see that hand.
Yeah. Just leave $100 as the plate comes by. And say, picture Earth. You all pictured Earth from a place you've never been, right? You all pictured Earth from a place that was like 19 people living have ever been, right? You pictured Earth from space, right? That is how we think of Earth. If I said picture Earth to somebody in 1400, they would all look down, right? Because they perceive the world from their own perspective, right? We throw our imagination into some perspective other than our own for how we live in our imagination lives in the balcony of reality, right? We don't see the world from our own perspective. And we grow up in a world where no one does, right? So the modern man has a fractured sense of self because we actually don't perceive the world from our own perspective.
Which is what God is teaching us to do in Psalm 19. Like he's
Yes,
inviting us, like this is how I created you to see the world.
Right.
Through your own eyes.
So there's a scientist named Neil deGrasse Tyson, which I've just taught my kids to spit when they hear his name. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Neil deGrasse Tyson. You don't need to know anything, but just spit when you hear his name. He's famous for going on podcasts and interviews and people say, well, what's going on here? And he says, well, isn't it this way? And he says, well, actually, right? And that's kind of how he does things.
His shtick.
Yeah, his shtick. Well, people will say, oh, well, doesn't the Earth goes around the sun? And he'll go, well, actually, the whole galaxy is moving around and is spinning as well. And so, if you really were to perceive what's going on here, you would have to perceive it not just from outside the Earth, but outside the galaxy, and all the way up there, and that's the real objective perspective, right? Is that our sun is moving around, and then we're all moving around the sun, and the assumption is that the objective perspective is something outside of us, and the only thing that you can call real knowledge is the objective perspective, right?
Which eliminates us.
Which eliminates us, yeah. So if you're seeing from your perspective, you can't really call it real knowledge. We've just all grown up with that assumption, where you say, well, is that objective, right? Is your knowledge
literal?
Is that literal? Is that objective? Is that real? Because we all have grown up that way, we actually have a hard time entering into our own perception. And so I think that nominalism isn't so much something that we think about as it's just the gut reaction that feels.
The water we're swimming
Yeah,
in.
it feels right,
Yeah.
right? And we don't know anybody that thinks different than that. And so there's nothing that ever comes along and challenges that perception.
Until tonight.
Until tonight, right? And there's been different writers that have tried to come along. So Coleridge is Walker Percy, Umberto Eco,
Lewis,
Martin Buber, some Christian, some not Christian. They come along and they say, is that an assumption that actually lines up with facts, right? Is that an assumption that really lines up with reality? And what has always happened is they get shushed, thrown out, sent away. You know, we don't want to hear, because we have told ourselves, the myth that we tell ourselves is by accepting the objectivity of calculable knowledge, we have been able to build all of these machines that make our life livable the way it is.
And you
right?
pull that one thread out.
And if you pull that thread out, all of the Industrial Revolution would go away, all of the computers would go away. You know, but it's a myth, right? It's a myth about where the modern world has come from that we have built everything on, right? It's an origin myth, right? Because it's the accepted origin myth, our gut reaction is nominalism.
Yeah.
Because that's the story we tell ourselves. It's like I went to public school, so it was all a bunch of burned out hippies that were my teachers. And so they tell you about the 60s and all of the revolutions and the sexual revolution, and they say that's where all of your freedoms come from now, right? Right? They're giving an origin myth. You study just a little bit of history and you realize that's actually not what happened, right? That really isn't what happened. But it's still the origin myth of this moment that we tell. Yeah. And what we need is people like Coleridge that come along and say, "Are you sure? Is there another option?"
Yeah.
Or guys like Maximus the Confessor, who has he has. So all the way back in the 500s, he was laying out this same logos metaphysic that God spoke the world into existence. So everything is made of logoi, the Greek word for words. Everything is made of words,
Yeah.
right? And we're the kind of creatures because we're also made of words. We're the kind of creatures that can perceive the word that is being spoken in front of us, the tree, which is a word. It's made of a word. It's made of God's word. Because we're also word creatures made in the image of the God who both speaks and hears. When we come across a tree, we can hear the word tree through our eyes. So that's what the world is made of words. Or Jonathan Edwards, who says something, he says, God didn't just create with his word. He is continually creating by his continual speaking.
Eternal
right?
act of
The
creation.
eternal act of creation is God continually speaking the world. He didn't speak once. What Coleridge is saying is something that theologians have been saying, and what it gives us is an understanding of ourselves and an understanding of our experience and an understanding of the world that all fits together, right?
Yeah.
So why is poetry so important? Well, it's because we're made of poetry, right? Why? I mean, when God says, "Hey, I'm going to remake the world," He didn't send an engineer; He sent a preacher, right? It says, "Go out and speak this word," right? I don't have a Bible. Imagine it, right? Go out and speak this word, because the world is made of this, and so if you're going to remake it, you remake it with words, and the Word of God is the Scriptures are the kind of Word of God that remakes a world made of words.
Yeah.
Or Ephesians 4, when Paul is talking about how we speak to one another, he says, "Go out and build one another up." Right? Well, because you're speaking to somebody made of words, and so you're being brought in by God as part of this construction project of this person made of words, and so your words are either building them up or tearing them down because they're made of those.
Well, and then specifically, psalms, hymns, spiritual songs. Speak poetry to them.
Yeah, right.
It's the poetry that builds them up. So you go home tonight, read a poem. What is happening in that moment? I read a poem. How am I cultivating this deeper understanding of the world, this deeper sense that what I'm seeing is words, I am a word, words are important. How does poetry specifically help cultivate that sense, a greater vision?
Yeah. Well, just poetry doesn't do it. Mm-hmm. Good poetry does it.
Exactly.
Right? Bad poetry undoes it. Right?
Right.
But it's poetry. A good poem. What it is doing is it's taking the words and the images and drawing them together and showing you the connections. So if you read something like The Dream of the Rood, Anglo-Saxon poem, from the perspective of the cross, as Christ is coming up and hanging on the cross and then being taken down, right? So what would that be called? Is that the paraphrastic, when you retell something from it? Bill, what's that called? When you retell it from a different perspective?
I think it's paraphrasis. That makes sense.
Yeah,
that sounds right.
I think so. Right. So it's a story you know, right? It's a story you've heard, right? And it's the cross explaining to the rest of the trees when he goes back what happened. Right? Let me tell you about it. And so then the rest of the trees are listening to the cross talk about what God did with a tree, right? And so now every tree has said, "Oh, we got to be that. Like we're this central to the story of God's salvation of the world." And so now the author of The Dream of the Rood has pulled together what happened on the cross, the fact that it's made of wood comes from a tree, and every tree now, when you go out and see, I have wondered, do the trees sit around and say, I come from a seed that comes from a seed that comes from the seed of
my great-great-grandfather.
my great-great grandpa, he grew up next to the tree that became the cross,
or the sheep. Like my great aunt was in that herd that the angels.
But every tree now, in our imagination, it is a tree. It comes from the trees that were spoken into existence at the beginning, right? So it already had that meaning. God, in history, added a new meaning to tree. Right? Mm-hmm. And so now, when you see a tree, every tree is connected to the trees of the knowledge of good and evil, or the fig trees in the garden. Right? It's connected to the trees that made the ark. It's connected to the cross. It's connected to the trees that grow up around the church and produce leaves to heal the nations. Right?
The tree that Boniface cut down.
Yeah, the tree that Boniface cut down, and that becomes the first that's probably what the trees are all around here are all bragging
Right,
about.
exactly.
Right? It's like, my great grandpa is in that big wood in Oxford. Yeah, that's us. But the world is the kind of world that is speaking that way, right? So every tree is an opportunity to be reminded of what God has done through trees. But everything is like that, right? So when God creates the Garden of Eden, he puts it in the east of the land of Eden, facing east. The sun comes up in the east, and then it's a place where light is transformed into fruit. And then Adam is that kind of gardener. His job is to be transforming light into fruit. So when Paul comes along at the beginning of Colossians and he says, the light of the gospel has finally come, and I pray that it continues to restore your fruitfulness, right? Paul is reading the world rightly, poetically. He's catching the echoes from stanza to stanza, from Eden to the present. And then so studying poetry and learning how the echoes of story and words work turns us into the kind of people that can then live well in the kind of world God made.
Reading it rightly.
Reading it rightly, yeah.
Yeah, thoughts, questions.
So that was
comments.
That was a shotgun approach. But
yeah, Jim.
So are you arguing, just a different way of saying all of this, or some of this, is that whenever we know truth, any truth that we know is not something that we just gin up in ourselves through words, but it's only true because God has said it. Whether he said it in the scripture and it's true that Jesus, was born in Bethlehem,
right,
or that it's true that a car drove by outside
Yeah.
and I just heard it was otherwise. Is that logos connecting for what's outside and what's inside? God is that all truth I know because God revealed it.
Right. Something else that happened, during the time that we stiff-armed God in the Enlightenment and moved gradually, but then somewhat rapidly toward an us-centered world that then eventually eliminated ourselves, like you're saying, and put our perspective out there, and then that's truth. When we did that, we stopped thinking that revelation matters, right? That revelation is actually the source of all understanding. And this is what Coleridge is getting, I believe Coleridge is getting at with how do I know the meaning of that work of the Logos out there? Well, it's because that work of the Logos has been revealed here. It's not something that I came up with. It's not something that I discovered. It's God built in me a fluency in making me in his image that then I tarnished and destroyed and turned from, but then in redemption and the renewal of the mind come back to, such that, again, it's not me ginning something up. It's not, neither the truth nor the meaning is originating here, but rather what I do is simply understand.
So in that sense, all truth is God's truth.
Right.
All knowledge is revelation.
All knowledge is based on revelation, which is why all knowledge is based ultimately on faith. Right? There's nothing that you know apart from faith in something. Faith in my senses, faith that the world is intelligible, faith that what the world is telling me corresponds to reality, right? Faith that it is God that is revealing himself to me, faith that God is being true when he reveals something to me, right? All of it is this fundamental basis of belief that I just take for granted, right? This I assume. So to say that I can know something objectively apart from faith, apart from belief, that I have drilled down to the foundation of knowledge, I don't need any of that faith. That's just nonsense, right? You've stopped speaking meaningfully. tried, right, and tried to use that to prove the existence of God. But yeah, no, all truth is revealed. All meaning is revealed, because all meaning and all truth is outside of me, in God. And that is what is being revealed, what is being spoken, what is being communicated through everything that I see. Yeah.
I'm thankful that you don't have to be a philosopher or a theologian to walk through the redwoods and
Yeah.
feel truth.
Absolutely. We both come from, or have spent time in the redwoods. I come from the redwoods, but yeah.
I've shared, I've
Yeah.
experienced redwoods for the first time, or the ocean.
Yeah.
So, as you're experiencing truth, you're not having to go through all these mind games,
No.
not games, but mind thoughts, right?
Right.
As a Christian, you can go out, walk through the arboretum, and feel truth.
Well, and this gets at a really important point. We intuitively know that this is true, right? It's our rationalizations that keep us from knowing rightly, right? That's what Paul says in Romans 1. It's in our unrighteousness, it's in our sin, it's in our rebellion that we suppress this intuitive knowledge that God is real, right? We step outside and it's a designed world. No question, no doubt. And it's only the stupidity of sin and rebellion that wants to confuse the matter. But intuitively, we all know. We all know that this is spoken word, that this is designed, that this is given, that this is created, that this is shaped, that this is a reflection of something, a mind, a heart, an affection higher than myself, transcendent, above, beyond.
And you're robbing yourself.
Right.
When you have that mentality, you're robbing yourself of so much.
Right.
Well, yeah, there's a reason that when Paul goes to describe the doctrines of demons, he says, touch not, taste not, marry not, right? It's all avoid this, avoid that, right? Because
It's unsafe.
yeah.
As soon as you touch something.
If don't eat the French fries.
Right.
Right, that's dangerous, right? That's the sort of thing Satan says.
Right.
Now there might be a right amount of French fries,
moderation.
right? But it's because God made the kind of world where if you deep fry a potato and put salt on it, it's glory.
It declares the glory of God.
Yeah, right.
Day to day utters speech. Night to night.
So. French fries are unsafe if you want to stay an atheist.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
So, and Nietzsche, when we hear of Nietzsche saying the death of God, what he actually is talking about is he's talking about the new astronomy, right? He's talking about now that we have that science has told us that that's just empty space. And that those lights, that it's an illusion that those are real lights. They're just burning balls of fire. He says we no longer have to argue against the existence of God. If we can just let the world know that the sky is not really anything other than empty space, and then they'll make up their own arguments against God's existence.
It's almost, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's almost as if he's saying, you guys realize that you just killed God. Right? It's almost that cautionary, there's a cautionary note too. Like we've just killed God. We've just removed the reason for God to exist. We've just explained him away.
Yeah, as soon as you accept a materialistic, if you look up and you see it's just matter, right? Then the next thing you do is you look at your neighbor and think it's just matter, right?
At which point it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter anymore, right? Yeah. Chesterton says that everyone who wants to remake Earth begins by remaking the sky, right? Says that's how we do it. You change what people see when they look up, and it will change the way they see the world around them.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, because that's what God made first.
Right. Light.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brett.
Can you guys help me kind of integrate the poetic approach, Coleridge, with, some of the things we like about modern science, the way that modern science really digs into the internal material, and forces of things, and kind of brackets the metaphysics to some extent in order to just specialize and get a really refined, mathematically precise and detailed, understanding.
Yeah.
So they have to be, those two things are consistent, but how do you integrate them?
Yeah, I think the first step is just to realize that science doesn't answer all the questions, right? You don't go to science for what does it mean. You go to science for what is it. But with knowing that there's another level of what is in existence, meaning the meaning. So science is incredibly helpful in the rational, going back to Lewis, the organ of reason, the organ of truth, and the organ of meaning. You go to science for the truth claims, but before you even get there, you have already established and come with it with a set of assumptions that are based in the imagination, based on what something means. Like, in order to do experiments at all, you have to know what hydrogen means, what oxygen means, and how 2 parts of one and 1 part of the other make water. Like, science can show you how that works and name it and label it. But the minute we start to say, and this goes back to the whole the water that we're living in over the past 400 years, we have said that that's all that it is, and that's all that it means is the sum of its parts. Science is great in determining and discerning the sum of the parts, but as soon as we say that that's all that it is, that's all that's going on, that's where we gain or we get truncated in our understanding of the world. There's more than that. So Eustace is right. In our world, it's a giant ball of flaming gas. But that's not all it is. What would you add?
I think so. First, I would say yes, that's true. You use the Voyage of the Dawn Treader was an important part of me ending up a Christian.
Right.
So I had a great librarian at my elementary school that gave me Lewis, and he gave me Tolkien, and he gave me King Arthur, and all of these things, but in particular, I read The Voyage of the Dawn Treader so many times that I had to tape it back together in elementary school, I ended up becoming. I ended up in the 6th grade because I wanted to be a scientist. Declared myself an atheist in the 6th grade, and I wasn't terribly worried about losing Jesus, but I was really bummed that I was losing Reepicheep. Because I knew, saying the sorts of things I was saying, that he would run me through and throw me overboard. Like, there wasn't a spot on the Dawn Treader for me anymore. But one of the things that you see happening in the early Enlightenment, when Descartes comes along, and part of what he is doing is he's bringing back in Plato's understanding of knowledge. To be able to really call it knowledge, you have to have direct access to the nature of a thing to be able to really call it knowledge. And it's a big part of Plato's allegory of the cave, is that the philosopher king is the one who no longer sees the shadows, but actually sees the thing direct. Right? And so he has direct knowledge of the nature of a thing, and that's the only thing that's real knowledge. All mediated knowledge through the shape of a thing, you can't call real knowledge. And the philosopher king is the one who escapes the mediated knowledge and ends up getting direct knowledge of a thing. Well, that actually, Plato is right about that, and well, he's right about, and then he says, and all of it is remembered knowledge from before you were born, right? So you are returning to direct knowledge of the nature of a thing, which is what you knew before you were born. Turns out Plato was right about that, but it only applies to Jesus, right? So Jesus is the only one that existed beforehand, and so he is describing, in his Philosopher King, he's actually describing Jesus coming along. Right? He just doesn't know that yet, but he reasons to the fact that that's the only thing that you could actually call real knowledge, and it turns out that he's describing the kind of knowledge only God has. And so when a man comes along and has that knowledge, Jesus, then he is. So it's weird that Plato was right about that, but then wrong about that for us, because none of us have remembered knowledge of from when before we were born. None of us have direct access to knowledge of the nature of a thing. Well, Descartes said, he accepted Plato's definition of knowledge and then said, but maybe we can get there through math. Math seems to be knowledge of reason direct, right? Knowledge that's calculable and guaranteed. So 2 + 2 is 4, no matter what, all of the time, right? So he says, if that's what knowledge is, can I back up all the way to something that I can call that kind of knowledge, and then build the rest of the knowledge by good and necessary consequence from that thing that we can call direct knowledge of the nature of a thing? And his answer was, well, my knowledge of my own existence is the only thing that can be called that kind of knowledge, which is Plato's knowledge. So when he says, I think, therefore I am, he's saying that's the only thing that we can know the way Plato says knowledge
That's direct knowledge.
is direct knowledge, right? So he's not being unreasonable. It turns out he just got what the nature of knowledge is wrong, right? But what it causes is Spinoza to come along and say, okay, if that's true, can we get direct knowledge of the right use of myself from that? And so he tries to build a geometric proof for ethics. And Leibniz comes along and says, no, you can't know anything that way except for calculable math. Can we build an entire system of knowledge that is just calculable math? And he invents binary code as a means of communication so that all knowledge can be based on math, right? And so by now, you've got all of the philosophers of the Enlightenment no longer believing that anything they know can be called real knowledge, because Spinoza is like eating sand, right? It might be good for you, but it's not fun, right? Everybody goes, there's no way that's really the way to know how to be a good human. And then they read Leibniz and they're like, the math is too hard. I can't understand that philosophy. So Kant comes along and he says, well, how about we just separate knowledge into two kinds of categories? Knowledge of things that we can gain by the senses and reason with, and then all those other things that you can't get that way, right? And what that ends up doing is it divides scientific knowledge from poetic knowledge, right? So when we come to do science, the problem is not that the scientific method isn't powerful for understanding employing a certain kind of reason. The problem is that it's not a separate kind of knowledge altogether that we have to figure out how to bring back together. The knowledge is united in the thing that we're studying. The reality is integrated in the thing.
Right.
What's not integrated is us.
Right.
We're the divided thing, not the thing. So when you want to come along and predict the trajectory of your of your cannonball, right? And so you're doing the math, and we say, okay, well, we did that with science, but what does a cannonball mean poetically, right? The problem isn't in the thing. The problem is that we are disintegrated perceivers. So I don't think we have to change the way we do science. I think we have to go to the Lord and ask to be reintegrated. So Paul says that one of the things he prays for is that they would be simple. And in our mind, we hear that and we think, oh, he wants us to be dumb, or like to not think too much, right? But simple is a philosophical term meaning of one substance, right? Sin and the fall shattered our selfhood, right? And as moderns, we are fully and completely, we fully embraced the shatteredness and then passed it on generationally. Kind of World War II, World War I really on, the generation gap has just further divided and divided and divided us. But to be reintegrated is to be returned to our humanity, right? Is to come to ourself and realize that we're eating with the pigs, right? I think that phrase, when that he comes to himself, it is really important, right? So you've got the son who said, "Dad, I wish you were dead. Give me part of the inheritance. I'm going to go off." And then God, reality, God and reality all push on him, and the next thing you know, he's feeding the pigs. And it says he comes to himself, right? Well, by walking away from his father, he has actually divided his selfhood, right? He's Voldemorted his selfhood by murdering the relationship with his father. He comes to himself, which returns him to his father, returns him to who he was intended to be, returns him to who he really was all of this time. So I think this process of returning to ourselves and reintegrating, it's a repentance, it's a returning to ourselves, it's a turning from sin, but it's also a turning back to one another, right? We aren't the kind of creature that can even see ourselves, right? We're not like snails who can like turn our eye in and look at ourselves. Like God made us the kind of creature that actually can't see ourselves. And so loving one another, restoring relationships, restoring generational relationships, restoring marriages. I think that's the process of reintegrating our selfhood, is coming to ourselves, returning to our Father, returning, like it says in Malachi, when Christ comes, he's going to return fathers to their children, right? I think that the process of becoming reintegrated people that don't live with a shattered sense of selfhood, dislodged from reality, unable to live well, I think it's communal restoration is what we need.
Which would
things like this.
Which would allow you to see the thing as it is, even while you're doing scientific experiments with it.
Right. Yeah.
I understand that when I'm picking up the tool of the scientific method, or I'm picking up the tool of experimentation, I'm only addressing a part of it, but I'm able to know in my integrated self that that's not all that I'm touching on. I'm shining a flashlight on one aspect of this integrated whole.
Yeah, all of our chemists become alchemists again.
Right.
Deep medieval humor.
Worth noting that so many of the scientific revolution, the scientists had that thorough classical education. They had some of the tools of poetic and imagination. And so many of them actually published poetry. How many scientists, engineers, the guys who are doing the latest thing in NASA or SpaceX, how many of them are poets, published poets.
Well, just
who
look
are
at the scientific
fluent in
journals.
this language. Yeah, exactly. And so part of what we've lost is we've become more truncated in our languages. And scientists in particular don't have the poetic arts to
Yeah.
be able to see what a thing means as well as what it is.
Yeah.
They need to restore, I think scientists need to become poets.
Yeah. Sean, last thing, and then we're going to integrate all of this with wine and cheese.
Very good. I appreciate what you said, that we can't look at ourselves, but we do have a mirror that we can look at ourselves. But because we're sinful, we need one another.
Yeah.
Because the mirror is a false representation, because we misinterpret it, right?
Yeah.
That's why we need one another to look at us, and we need to be humble enough to let
Yeah.
people speak into us.
And that's where poetry also is helpful. If we're reading honestly, before it can come a window to see the world more accurately, it has to be a mirror first to see ourselves more accurately. And not just poetry, but story in general, narrative. When I read Lord of the Rings, I'm not like Sam. I want to be like Sam, and that's letting Lord of the Rings read me in a profound way that helps me understand who I am, so that I can grow, and then gives me an example for whom I have an affection that draws my affections toward his to make me more like him, or more like Aragorn. All of which is just small little types of Christ.
And just recently I was somewhere and I'd made slides for a presentation, and I read them so many times. These are perfect. I put one up, and the first thing I see, now that all these people are looking at it, is a typo. Right? The typo was fully invisible to me until I saw the typo through the eyes of all of the people right there, right?
This is why we publish books, in order to find
Yeah,
typos.
It takes publishing in print
Yeah,
to find
the typo,
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
How many times
Doesn't matter.
we've read it digitally.
Yeah, because all
It has
this,
to be printed.
because all of a sudden other people's eyes shine a light on something that you couldn't see.
Yeah.
That's just I think we have to embrace that that's the kind of creature we are, right?
What's the river scared of?
yeah, exactly. The scared river. No, it's the scarred river. Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have to embrace and enjoy
Yeah.
that we are that kind of creature, that we have those kinds of limitations, and that we can't see, our own face.
Yeah. Which means taking ourselves less seriously than when
Yes.
we do.
Yeah.